Well, the psychos certainly got creative today. Final Destination Bloodlines. The latest in one of the most iconic early 2000s horror franchises. Is it Scream? Absolutely not. Is it fun? Mostly always yes. Now for those unaware, Final Destination is the disaster franchise where a group of people narrowly avoid death after someone has a premonition of the disaster happening, who then go on to be picked off in absurd ways as death evens the score. Because you can't cheat death, baby. There's a very simple set of rules. And mostly it's that you're fucked. Because a lot of those deaths end up being so brutal, you'd probably just wish you went out in the original disaster anyway. Well, sometimes. And there's a world where this all got derailed before it even started. If it had gone in production even just like a year later, I realize that's a long time by film standards, but if it had been planning for a 2001 release over a 2000 release, it may never have come out, or the home release might have been heavily affected by some other horrible tragedies involving planes. But it's a series that's both fun and does a really good job tapping into these these inner experiences we've all had and inner thoughts. Weird gut feelings, narrowly avoiding an accident, even the most mundane house slip-ups where you're like, dang, that could have been so bad. You trip over a box and then realize your trajectory was taking you right to the corner of a desk. And then of course the standard paranoia around worst case scenarios while on a plane or a bridge. So it's really something that can tap into the fears in our brain, which I always find is a great basis for a horror movie. And now for the first time in 14 years, we have another installment to the franchise, and it's pretty darn good, guys. So we're gonna do a little mix here today. As usual, I'm gonna talk about the new movie in detail after I give you my spoiler-free thoughts in the beginning, but in between that, I'm gonna talk about the other installments and then rank them up at the end, because why not? Final Destination is a franchise people are always like, why haven't you talked about that? And this might not be as detailed as the Scream video, but you'll still get my thoughts. In a very unintentionally hilarious way, I'm actually about to go on a little mental health break to one of the locations that this franchise is known for. So I figured I'd do a little bit of extra before I take off. You might not even realize I'm gone, or I might get caught in a death loop like Devon Sawa. I have to not say that. I won't be going through the books or comics because, yeah, there's actually a bunch of those too. I know I've read at least one of them, but maybe someday. I'm sorry, maybe this should have been the big one, but we're doing this. I do think the franchise does a really good job keeping each installment mostly related but able to work as a standalone film outside too. And even that one you get caught up by the end, it's just very directly related to the first movie. And while Bloodlines doesn't specifically mention any of the other movies, it's clearly tied in but works great as a jumping on point for new viewers. So if you have never seen a Final Destination movie, you are absolutely A-okay to start with this one, and I think this is a great one to start out with. Just like you're A-okay to use today's sponsor, Surfshark. If I had a death design hunting me down, I'd just connect to a different server location so it wouldn't know where I was. Surfshark VPN is my go-to when trying to access region-locked content and keep myself safe online. They let you connect to thousands of different server locations around the world, so that's where your internet thinks you are, which has a ton of uses. Like when I travel, I can use it to make sure my YouTube Premium works as expected and that my Canadian streaming services are accessible everywhere. It is not my fault that Canada has Crave. I need my HBO shows. And if I know that another country's Netflix has a movie I'm trying to watch that I just can't watch in Canada, I can just use Surfshark so my Netflix thinks I'm in that location. Take this video for example. Netflix in Canada has none of the Final Destination movies. But UK Netflix has them all, except 4, which is fine. It's like they knew they needed to leave that one out. So all I had to do was connect to a UK server location, refresh the page, and boom, all the death hijinks I could ever want. Content access really is my main priority when it comes to Surfshark, because there's nothing worse than not being able to watch something that you know is just available somewhere else behind a little wall. And Surfshark teleports you right through that barrier. It's fast, secure, blocks unwanted ads, and it even lets you generate alternate emails and US phone numbers so you can cut down on spam and scams. So try out Surfshark for yourself today by going to surfshark.com/Jedi or by using code JEDI at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark. Which brings us to my no spoiler thoughts on Bloodline, which is super fun. Like if you can catch this in a theater with a good amount of people in it, they're all ready to scream, it is absolutely ideal. It's bloody, creative, more so than ever. A lot of these deaths feel like a detailed Rube Goldberg machine where it's not a matter of what thing is going to kill the person, but in what order are they going to be used to cause the death. I know that is very common for Final Destination, but this movie really ramps it up. This is a movie that knows exactly what it is, what it needs to be, and plays into that in some of the best ways. There's lots of really big, great set pieces for the kills too, lots of fake outs to previous deaths that keep you squirming. A classic. I think the biggest issue with this one, unfortunately, is a lot of the sentimentality that they try to throw into it. Like there's some familial drama going on here, and it's very weak with certain characters, but even those moments get funny when you have have characters delivering lines like, "I can see him coming. We have to do this together." And I must add that she said that immediately after she didn't see something coming, but that's fine. It's not bad acting for the most part, but there's moments, there's little nuggets. I also think the third act before the classic Final Destination finale is fairly weak, unfortunately, but the build up to that point is so very fun and it closes out crazy enough that we'll allow it. It also doesn't last that long, so it's fine. And I actually had no idea what to expect going into this movie. I avoided all the trailers. I did see that original teaser that was in the tattoo parlor, and I was instantly on board from that. But the opening of this movie is probably one of the best the franchise has ever had. And it ends up being a completely different approach, which I do appreciate because it's not like spitting in the face of what we know of this franchise, but it's also like, it's flipping things up a bit. So the main movie is taking place in the present, but it starts back in 1969. And honestly, I would have been super okay sticking back then. I was super into this vibe. It was really working for me, but there's a reason why this is called Bloodlines. I won't go into any deeper detail on that right now, don't worry. Unlike a couple of the other installments, which I'll detail when we get there, I think this one has a good crop of characters, really fun banter. Though I do think I like some of the more disposable characters than the leads, but it's still solid. It does start veering into generational trauma, but it's almost like they realize that that's like the trend of the moment and immediately just pulled back from going too hard on it just to maintain what people want out of a Final Destination movie. Some weird happenstances, some coincidences, the idea of cheating death, and the crazy machinations that fall out when it tries to stop you from doing that. So if you're a fan of Final Destination or horror in general, this is an easy recommend for the theaters, specifically if you can catch it with like a solid audience. I know sometimes you can't control your audience, but like this is one. You'd like some more people there. Again, it does have a minorly stupid third act, but the ending is fantastic for the occasion, so we'll allow it. There's also tons of little Easter eggs and homages to the previous installments, which we'll get to when we get down to the spoilers, but like, this was exactly what it needed to be. So with the spoiler-free thoughts out of the way, this is where I fall on the other Final Destination movies. And again, will serve as like a little mini recap for those of you who want a little refresher before Bloodlines or just want to know my thoughts. I'll try to remember to put some timestamps down below if you really just want to cut to the Bloodlines breakdown. So all the way back in the year 2000 with Final Destination 1, where a group of high schoolers are on their way to Paris. And this cast is stacked maybe a little bit retroactively because we got like Devon Sawa, who I've loved for years. He's the lead of this one and he's from Idle Hands. Casper and SLC Punk. Sean William Scott, fresh off American Pie. Ali Larder in between Varsity Blues and Legally Blonde. Kerr Smith in the middle of his Dawson's Creek run. Definitely some other familiar faces, but that is one of the main staples of any good teen horror, a robust, likable, or love-to-hateable cast of characters. And it is a great premise out the gate. We got a bunch of people about to get on a flight, we got a person who's been panicking about that flight all day, and then finds himself having a premonition of the plane exploding following a series of minor incidents. So when he's rocked back to reality and those small things start happening again, like swapping seats, the tray table breaking, he freaks out and gets a handful of people and himself thrown off the plane, watching in horror as the plane does in fact explode. Which obviously leads to a lot of mixed reactions from the survivors. You got Clear here, who is just thankfully in awe of him and probably has a little crush. The teacher is terrified of him.
Don't talk to me, you scared the hell out of me.
Carter blames him for it. Sean William Scott just timidly treats him like a psychic. His best friend's dad blames him for it happening because his other son didn't make it off the flight, and it definitely felt like that was the favorite son. All fairly valid responses, honestly. Maybe not the last one, but when you just don't understand why something happens, you know, there's a lot of misplaced anger and feelings out there. And whatever entity gave him that heads up was actually swirling around him the night before. You got a weird feeling, a strange wind, the clock glitching out to match the flight number 180, which will go on to be a staple in the franchise. His birthday matching the departure time. For something that has a plan for when it wants people to die, it really does love giving people little clues. And then 39 days after the death of the 39 students, plus this baby, obviously a lot of other people too, but like the baby, a series of new accidents start happening to all the people who made it off the plane. Starting tragically with Alex's best friend Todd, which he also got a brief little sign was next. This was also when they introduced fan favorite William Bloodsworth, the damn Candyman himself. I think the only character that has his own Wikipedia page in the entire franchise. He's the owner of a funeral home and will show up in a lot of the other installments with these chilling lessons of the nature of death and its design. And that by throwing off that design, death will always be trying to right itself. And the only way you might be able to prevent that from happening is disrupting the pattern again. So basically, if you know that Clear is supposed to be the next one who dies, if you stop that event from happening, it'll just move on to the next person. And this is where we get the introduction of one of the key rules. The new deaths always take place in the same order those people would have died had they not made it out of that original disaster. So that's how they can try to disrupt it. They should always know who's next. Obviously, people swapping seats around makes this a little bit confusing, but it's fine. Carter's not down for this plan though, and just wants to take them all out at once so they're not just waiting for some horrible fate. And by the time he realizes it's not his time to die, death won't let him out. Because like, it is your turn. But because Alex tries to save him and refuses to move out of the way of the train and it's not his time to die yet, death lets him save Carter and immediately takes out Billy. Decapitated by shrapnel. And that's how fast it can move on to the next person if you mess with it. So by the end, like many horror movies, the three survivors think they're in the clear. Decide to take a replacement trip to Paris 6 months later, which I thought was a little bit weird. But then Alex and Clear suddenly start getting that odd feeling before Carter pulls Alex back from his death, immediately switching it back over to him.
So who's next?
So that's what this empire is built on, and I think it's great, it's iconic, it's fun, it commits to a mean ending. Like, yeah, we've still got 2 leads, but with the understanding that death is always cycling back towards them, bringing us to Final Destination 2, which is not a bad movie, but I don't love it. And sadly, I think that really just comes down to not loving the protagonist in this. I think she's kind of boring, and I don't like the romance they try to set up with her and the cop. Her name's Kimberly, and I feel like I only remember that because it reminds me of the Power Rangers. But I do like how they tie this into the first movie, and there's a lot of good stuff going on with the characters outside these two. So initially, this just seems like a new round of the same thing we know, just 1 year later on the anniversary of that original 180 crash, starting with a highway chain reaction instead of a plane explosion, and this is where we get that, you know, the log scene that becomes that staple of the franchise. And to make this one extra cruel, when Kimberly tries to stop the chain reaction from happening, her friends in the car still end up hit and pulled into the pileup, so they're all dead, so the people that survive actually have no direct connection to her at all. And just like in part 1, but much faster, the people that died in her premonition start dying in that order. We're talking next day, this dude ends up impaled by his fire escape ladder. And because this is a continuation, a lot of people in this movie are aware of Flight 180 and that like there was some like weird thing about someone seeing it before it happened and then everybody who got off the plane still ended up dying. Except for Clear Rivers, who has voluntarily checked herself into an asylum because yeah, in our off-screen time, Alex ends up killed by a falling brick. Apparently it's because he had existing commitments, but man, that sucks. But yeah, Clear basically just becomes a guru for the group. She leaves the asylum to help them, brings them right to Bloodworth for another mildly unsettling death breakdown where he says that only new life can defeat death. Every time he pops up, he's like, oh shit, that last one didn't work, but I got a new one for you. But yeah, that ends up meaning that if you die and get brought back to life, death technically gets to count you as a body, but you get to go on living. It takes them a bit to get to this point though. Before that, it's mostly people just not believing that anything's going wrong at all. But then after it becomes undeniable that they're all going to die horrific deaths, they realize that each one of them was involved in a situation where if the people who had survived Flight 180 hadn't got off it, they wouldn't be alive either. So the comp got pulled away from his partner who ended up killed to handle the train situation that killed Billy. Eugene would have been stabbed by a student, but he was transferred to a different school 2 days beforehand to replace Val Luton. So none of them should be alive because that person shouldn't have been around to intervene. Which I thought was a super cool way to build on this premise. It's literally just a disaster butterfly effect. Death really is such a petty bitch, and I like that. So petty, in fact, that people can't even kill themselves to avoid whatever horrific hijinks death has planned. Like, we're talking 6 misfires of a gun. Because if it's not your time, it's not your time, even though you missed your time. I know some people take issue with that because it makes death more of like a specific villain over just a force, but whatever, it's fun. Tragically, Clear does end up dying in this one, a double kill hospital explosion, flaming body goes flying, no final girl here. Or is there? Kimberly realizes that all of her premonitions are actually about her and that the doctor she thought was going to kill someone is actually going to be around to revive her. So she drives an ambulance into the lake, like it would take so long for her to die here, but sure, it works. So this is apparently the only guaranteed survivor of the franchise. I guess he's one too, but I think It's just her. No offense, girl, but boo. I get she's in Criminal Minds. She was one of the suicidal virgins. I just don't care about her character. Out of all the people we could have had survive, we get Kimberly. Like, at least it's not one of the people from Final Destination 4, but like, come on. Now, it doesn't end completely happy. It's not that kind of franchise because they realize at the end of the movie that the kid of the farmer who had helped them in the field was saved by Rory, meaning that he's another loose end and gets blown up by the barbecue. Lots of fun in this movie. Someone gets decapitated by an elevator. It kicks off the classic log death fear in the movies, which everyone can relate to if you've been near one of those. I just don't like those two main characters much at all. Maybe I'm alone, let me know, but I just thought they were kind of boring. Bringing us to part 3, which was actually my first ever Final Destination movie, and I think it's a very solid jumping on point. The original director and writers come back for this one, which I do think makes it different. It relates back to the first 2 movies, but still operates enough on its own to not matter if you haven't seen them. I also remember that it had an interactive portion on the DVD called Choose Their Fate, where you could make key decisions at specific points in the movie to change the course of events. Until Dawn Who? Obviously, you could only go so far, especially at the time, but it's a neat gimmick. I think this movie actually had a ton of like very bad test screenings until they got to the final version, which I really like. But I guess that gave them enough to work with to try some different options, or maybe that was the plan from the beginning. I thought it's cool. It's nice. It also stars Scott Pilgrim, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is fantastic as always, Ryan Merriman, who was in the Halloween Resurrection and the 2 Ring remakes before this, and then went on to be Ian in Pretty Little Liars. Canadian actor Jesse Moss, who does a ton of voice acting work, but is also the guy Ginger hooks up with in Ginger Snaps. Also Chris Lemke, who was Sam in Ginger Snaps. But Final Destination 3 added in a fun new element that felt like it was speaking directly to me because it reminded me of my favorite Goosebumps books, Say Cheese and Die, and of course, Say Cheese and Die again. It's a senior carnival event. Wendy's taking yearbook pictures, terrified of roller coasters, very similar to how Alex was terrified of flights, before she has a premonition of the coaster derailing. She freaks out, gets let off along with anyone else in this section, but they won't let her boyfriend off, who ended up at the front of the coaster, who then dies. And this is a fantastic starting set piece. Who doesn't have that fear? Even if you love roller coasters, you're still always gonna have that moment of like, oh my god, what if like this just falls off? Brutal. So both Kevin and Wendy lose their significant others, and the senior class is a little bit wrecked. And Kevin really hones in on that premonition she had and realizes that this has happened before, which puts Wendy down a rabbit hole all the way back to Lincoln and through the disasters in the last 2 movies. Lincoln is because the last picture that was taken of him officially had a broken glass plate, which left a mark through his head that apparently matches the bullet trajectory that killed him. So they're basically just saying that these weird death events have been happening since Lincoln, and it's just been going down from generation to generation, and that will actually tie into Bloodlines a little bit, but we'll get there. But this is where Say Cheese and Die comes in. The pictures that Wendy took basically end up being omens for how the people who got off the coaster end up dying. And this movie has some of the most iconic deaths of the franchise. Other than the coaster, we've got the tanning bed scene where 2 girls end up torched. Their picture had a crazy light flare distortion. Then Lewis's head here is like oddly out of the shot because of the frame rate, and then you just see the 2 Sultan swords and the hammer bell in front of him. So he dies at the gym when Sultan's swords slice the cables to the machine he's working on and the weights crush his head. You know, honestly, he probably went faster here than he would have on the roller coaster. Then the nail gun death that I think about every time I see one. I know that's one of my big intrusive thoughts. Like, oh my god, what if that just like right in, really taps in there. But that death makes this interesting because Ian was supposed to be up next, but then Wendy and Kevin intervene, so it immediately flips to Ian's girlfriend, which puts him on a bit of a revenge run against Wendy, where it seems like he's supposed to be the cause of her death, which would have been a really interesting turn of events. Then he gets split squished by a cherry picker. I really like the final act here with the fireworks and the horse. There's lots of near misses. So at this point, Wendy, Kevin, and her sister Julie, who was supposed to be the next to die before Kevin saved her, all think they're in the clear. They've cheated death. They've avoided their order before the camera snaps one last picture of them from the ground. This is actually one of the alternate scenes from the Choose Their Fate, where it also showed a newspaper saying that Kimberly and the cop both died, but that is not the canon this franchise is going with. Then we cut to 5 months later, where all 3 of them, with no prior planning, all find themselves on subway train 081, the reverse of 180, which was the flight number, which is present, as I mentioned, in some way or variation in each of the Final Destination movies as an omen in its own right. So Wendy has a new premonition, but they can't get off the subway, and they all die horrifically. It just ends with the black screen after her vision and the sound of like the train crashing. But yeah, easily one of my favorites of the series, partially probably because it's the first one I saw, but I also think it is very fun. It has lots of iconic moments. Even the way the pervert guy died was crazy. It's got a lot of great set pieces, good characters. It's right up there with part 1 for me. There's also a few Glee-related things here, like Corey Monteith is actually in this movie briefly. The guy who played Ken Tanaka's in it. The school is McKinley High, and somehow I still think Glee is more cursed than Final Destination. So then we get The Final Destination, one of the exact type of movies that Scream 4 would go on to make fun of, and I think it is the worst of the bunch. It's technically chronologically the 4th installment, but it doesn't feel related in any way at all. Like, there's no mention of those previous installments. There is a bunch of 180 related to Omens and mostly follows the same rules, but it does just feel like a really lazy reboot remake, which I guess Scream 5 also made fun of while being that thing, but it's fine. It went really hard on 3D because that was the gimmick of the moment. The CGI is absolutely atrocious. It is literally one of the worst looking horror movies I've ever seen in my life that actually has a decent budget to work with. It's actually just one of the worst looking movies I've ever seen in terms of the effects. And the acting is also really bad. Like, we're talking educational video bad. Like, I've seen sad boy Instagram scenes with better acting. James Wong, the director of parts 1 and 2, turned the movie down, so David Ellis from part 2 came back and sadly doing a much worse job in my opinion. Wong didn't want to be involved in the 3D gimmick. He was tragically busy making the live action Dragon Ball Z movie. And that seemed to be the end of his film directing career. He still does stuff in TV, but is funny. In terms of the initial event, it also feels like they don't understand what made the first 3 work. It feels like the one that people would be least likely to have paranoia around. Like, it makes sense for people to freak out about planes, car accidents, roller coasters, and bridges. Mostly all pretty common anxieties that also have like compounding anxieties on top of that. I just don't think that speedway racing events really fit into that mold. Made for a nice set piece and it has some fun moments, and they gave them some good ideas on how to use the 3D. Like when they rush out of the speedway after Nick, our lead, has his big old death premonition, someone else who technically made it out immediately gets crushed by a flying tire. But much like 2, our lead is just not that interesting. And the other characters all suck too. They are all so very bland. I think the only character I ended up liking in this is the security guard from the speedway. And the movie just makes like weird choices. Like, it kind of seemed like it wanted to try and tackle racism. The speedway has this racist redneck who literally starts whistling Dixie and then calls the security guard the N-word at a funeral, which I was absolutely not expecting. Like, hard R and all here. He ends up being the first to go out drugged by his own truck, which is nice, but he was literally planning a lynching. And not only does this movie feel disconnected from the rest of the franchise, it feels disconnected from itself. It doesn't feel like there's any buildup or connective tissue or reason to care about any of these characters. It's just kind of weird. I get that a large draw of these movies is seeing what kind of crazy wild deaths they can come up with, but there's gotta be some substance to care about. But not only do I not give a shit about any of the characters in this movie, it feels like they don't give a shit about each other either. Nobody feels real. It also reuses some stuff from other movies, like when George, who tries to kill himself multiple times but can't because death hasn't had his term with him yet, he ends up hit by an ambulance, which feels exactly like how Terry died in the first movie. I do like a callback, and I'm glad the man didn't have to suffer on his way out, but you just reused one of the most standard deaths. It serves as a good jump scare, and that's about it. This movie also, in my opinion, rips off Chuck Palahniuk's short story Guts, which I do not recommend ever reading. Maybe they came across the phenomenon separately because this is a thing that has happened in real life, and it is a thing that people have a fear of, but Guts was the first thing I thought of before realizing I really didn't want to have to see what was about to happen on screen. Yeah, the dude's butt gets stuck on the pool's drain pipe, and then he gets disemboweled. And honestly, it is worse to think about than watch what happened in the movie. You know, watching it was not so bad. Thinking about it is horrific. But the movie then goes on to do something that Twilight would go on to do even better. It goes on to have the longest secondary premonition scene we've seen so far before bopping us back to say, psych! Everything after George's death was a premonition, a solid 8 minutes of runtime for Nick to try and prevent an explosion, someone being eaten up by an escalator. And he does it! Ends up nail-gunned in a way that's much less effective than in part 3, but still alive, thinking once again that they've managed to cheat death. Until they're at that coffee shop and Nick starts noticing all the same signs from the movie repeating before he notices that the "It's Coming" etching he saw at the beginning of the movie on the table has now been X'd out. And he starts wondering if they only survived because death had another plan for them before they get killed by an oncoming truck. The 2 before this? Psych. Not real. This was the plan all along. So there's like some good ideas, a little bit of expanding of the lore and the rules, but yeah, this one just feels like another very forgettable horror movie from this time in history. Also, if they weren't supposed to die in the first premonition, why would he then have 2 premonitions of them dying? oh well. Because to make the mall scene make sense, you have to say that that premonition was never meant to happen, so Nick intervening doesn't mean all those people at the mall need to die, but that also means that the original premonition wasn't for him or maybe anyone else, so that he can't be around to interfere again. But then what does that mean? What does that mean? It just kind of feels like the classic horror and another one logic where they're just like at the last second we're gonna step it up for the vibes. Jason Voorhees sticking his hands out of the lake at the end of the first movie, whack. So yeah, this one is firmly in last place. It is fine to have on while doing things around the house, but there's just so little to care about in this one that there's no point laying out anything in detail. So when we got to Final Destination 5, I feel like people just didn't have a lot of hope. It came out the same year as Scream 4, so it easily could have been rolled into the dunk fest it was on. But I think it did something fairly interesting for the franchise and had a pretty cool twist that they did lay the groundwork for people to discover if they're fans and paying attention. The characters are decent, but our main guy is Hunter from The Office.
He is an excellent songwriter. Wait till you hear this.
And also Todd Packer himself is in this, basically playing Todd Packer.
Who can forget Trevor Wynn's smile? Or Isaac Palmer?
Did you just say my name?
Sam's love interest was Amy from The Walking Dead. One of the guys from Wolf of Wall Street is in this. And they bring back Tony Todd to be William Bloodworth for the first time since Part 2. He did have like a minor speaking role in Part 3, but this is cool. This one also had a really solid writer. I had better hopes, because immediately we're back with the fear that a lot of people actually have, some kind of bridge disaster. It's under construction, so there's a ton of equipment and heavy dangerous things around to hurt people. Like Tom Packer here gets melted alive by hot cement. Our secondary main girl gets impaled on a ship mast. Another death by metal pipe or rebar. But the interesting thing, Sam's girlfriend, or recent ex Molly, because she doesn't want to go with him to Paris, yes, Paris is mentioned a lot in this, seems to survive his premonition. So theoretically, she should be safe even after Sam gets people off the bus, but we'll see. This movie also brings back heavy police scrutiny. There is a decent amount of it in the first movie, but they know logically that Alex couldn't have made a plane explode, and then just kind of think he snapped from trauma. 2 obviously has the cop who believes in the phenomenon. Then 3 and 4 pretty much do away with it entirely. And then this one, there's an FBI agent up Sam's ass almost the entire movie, and Todd Packer is specifically relaying anything that seems remotely suspicious about any of the people involved.
Should we maybe have code names for one another, do you think?
But even with all that police involvement, there is no mention of any of the previous accidents. And I do think they did a really good job with those new deaths. You got Candace, who's Peter's girlfriend, literally gets folded like a pretzel as a gymnast. Easily one of the most visually brutal deaths of the franchise. And one of the many bait and switches, like you think she's gonna step on a screw, but then it's someone else doing it that sets things in motion. Someone else gets crushed by his statue at a massage parlor, and that is another one that you just keep thinking something else is going to cause the death, but then it just keeps going and going. There's a scene I literally can't watch happen where Olivia has her eye ripped out with a malfunctioning LASIK machine, which is absolutely one of my many nightmares. I don't like eye things. Ugh. Now before this, as mentioned, we get our William Bloodworth cameo. As usual, he is the coroner, and he leaves them with some haunting wisdom about death, that death is killing them because they shouldn't be alive, and that the only way to make it out is to kill someone else and claim their remaining lifespan. Ah, the Death Note method. That's a new one. Will that actually work? Well, they sure think it did. There was a mishap, clearly trying to take out Nathan, that ends up killing this other guy instead, so they assume that Nathan is now in the clear because Dennis, Todd Packer, gets taken out next. I wouldn't have directly called that murder, but I guess if someone else gets taken out in Death's plan when it was coming at you, I guess it feels like it got its life. But realizing that makes Peter, who's pissed at Sam for saving Molly in the premonition and not Candace, decides to kill Molly to extend his own life, and it can't be Sam because he's already on Death's list. But unfortunately, it's Agent Brock that ends up getting in the way. But Sam does still manage to kill Peter, which they believe saves him, because if Peter was no longer on Death's list because he killed Brock and then it moved on to Sam, so killing Peter would give Sam his remaining life, or does it? Or can Death have multiple plans for you? Yes, it can. Because this is where the movie pulls its twist. The entire movie, Sam's been talking about wanting to go to Paris to be an apprentice at this restaurant, the flagship location of the restaurant he's currently working at, Le Café Miro 81, which not only ties back into the number 180, but if you remember, that is the cafe they were at in French where the sign crushed Carter. And that's because this is Flight 180 to Paris. This movie was a secret prequel. They are getting on the same plane that is about to explode. And I love that. Again, they were just sprinkling in enough little hints for people paying attention. Like, I know I was like, why do they keep mentioning Paris? Like, that's such an interesting thing. Like, then there's also a picture at one point of Olivia where she's clearly at the same amusement park from Part 3. So you know that there's connection, but the prequel bit, that's cool. So while not the best movie overall, I love the fact that they called it part 5 and they made it a prequel. That ending is super good. It does have some funny moments. It's got some iconic deaths. So I put this one slightly above 2, I think. So that finally brings us to Bloodlines, which means spoilers. So we're going to go through and talk about the cool things it did and why I feel like it really does just build on that whole idea of this being a Rube Goldberg machine. But before that, this movie has so many nice callbacks. They get the finger prick, which has been present across a few of the movies to let you know that like a disaster is coming. It's like one of those initial indications after they come back from the premonition that things are going to play out exactly the same way. Repetitive songs that seem oddly specific to the death that's about to happen. And that kicked off right in the bathroom of the first movie. Callbacks to previous kills, but only used to really increase tension. Like we got some log truck features, which is a Final Destination favorite. Some like near misses of trucks. Explosions, which I didn't even mention in part 1. The horrific series of events that happened to Val Luton, the teacher, that ends up making it look like Alex might have stabbed her, but that was a whole little shenanigans set piece there. It reminded me a lot of the aunt kill in The Monkey. Even coins, which have been a less common inclusion to the series, I think mostly in the Final Destination, but they play a prominent role here, and it's a penny with Lincoln on it, which feels like it ties right back into part 3 with the Lincoln. It all just feels connected all the way back to Lincoln. They also managed to get Tony Todd back one last time before he passed away from cancer, and it actually works as a fantastic send-off for the character that answers some of the big questions people have had about him for a while, and a nice little send-off to us. And overall, I just think this movie does a really good job taking like little bits of the lore from across the series and making it work into one big movie that is very fun and would leave me excited for more installments. And again, it stays really sharp through the entire thing. It really just starts losing it at one aspect that feels a little bit stupid, and not stupid in a fun way, and we'll get to that. But let's dive in a bit. As mentioned, this movie starts in 1969 with Iris going to the opening of a brand new Skyline restaurant that honestly made me feel like this could have been in the same universe as Drop, or that Drop was secretly in the Final Destination universe, but no. And pretty quickly, there are a bunch of things that could potentially go wrong. The building is crickety, they're boasting about completing the build early, the elevator is sketch, there's a glass dance floor with a diamond chandelier above it, a kid tossing pennies off the roof, danger everywhere. And yeah, it all goes wrong. I think in previous installments, it's been pretty common for you to think it's gonna be one thing, and then it ends up being something else. This movie really does a good job making it all of the things in some way. So first you get a piece of the chandelier dropping and cracking the dance floor because diamond breaks glass. That's how you know it's real diamond. That little shit of a kid starts whipping pennies and one of them gets sucked into the vents and just stuck in a fan. And that leads to an incredible chain reaction of events. First, the support joints of the building were already starting to go. There's just entirely too many people in here. The dance floor cracks open and people start falling to their deaths. The coin gets shot into this thing that releases a bunch of gas inside the building. That kicks off a fire because this thing lit this woman on fire. Then that's basically an entire explosion. Then the stairs and the elevator collapse. Someone gets ripped in half. And then the building basically starts to Titanic. And that damn penny just falls out the vent to land on the piano, which was just enough to edge it over and start pushing people out and going right out the window. Which honestly leads to the most satisfying death of the entire movie. One where you're like, yeah, get that, you little shit. The piano crushes the little kid. I was like, this has been a year for young children just being bopped out of existence for the most part. You know, Thunderbolts brought him back, but not so much here. And so the last two people to die are Iris and the singer's young son. So when Iris snaps back, she actually manages to stop the entire chain reaction. She doesn't just grab her soon-to-be fiance and run. She starts actively like grabbing the penny from the kid, making sure the flambe station's shut down, getting everybody off the dance floor, saving every single person from an imminent death. But we're not seeing this through the perspective of Iris. This is a nightmare that Iris's granddaughter has been having for weeks, and it's a granddaughter that never met her. What a fun little flip up. So this is our lead, Steph, a university student on the brink of losing her scholarship because this nightmare wakes her up screaming Bella style every night, leading her to try to find answers, but her entire family is super weird about it. Like her mom had abandoned them when they were 10, so she can't go there, but her dad is super weird about the grandmother, and her uncle is downright upset at the fact that she asked. And I guess it's because the grandmother essentially made their life living hell to the point that they had to like move and not tell her where they were going because she was just obsessed with telling them all the different ways they were going to die, which apparently really shot off once their father died. That's when she really started snapping. And now she lives alone in a creepy battle cabin, which does not remotely seem like the safest place. Like even inside, it was easy to see so many different ways for Death to find her. She's just like so on edge all the time watching it, but why isn't this just like a gutted, padded room? But apparently Death is on her and she's just been dodging it for decades at this point. But now she got cancer, and because Death isn't going to get to claim her in some crazy way unless it can switch things up, I guess it's transferring her premonition to the granddaughter? Not the most logical thing, but we'll allow it. So she lays her entire theory out for Steph, that the premonition she had all those years ago directly matches Steph's nightmare, and that by saving all those people, it set off the biggest premonition chain reaction we've ever seen in this franchise. Basically resulting in it taking decades for Death to work its way through all of the survivors, because some of those people start having families, and because those families would never exist if they had died as intended, Death has to work its way through all of them, aka their bloodlines. Pretty neat, honestly. But Stephanie obviously thinks she's insane, coming at her with a death manifesto that's just like all of these different options of like, if you're on a plane, these are all the places you could die. Some log truck sketches. So to make Steph believe, she walks out of her cabin for the first time in ages and lets herself be killed. A very quick chain reaction with a fire extinguisher, the wind compass on her roof, which just had no reason to be part of that original design. Again, you're supposed to be building a safety bunker, and instead you built a death trap. But whatever, she gets abruptly impaled through her skull a foot away from the granddaughter. Just a little bit of trauma for the road. Like, what if she wanted to believe you and now she's just like so messed up she can't do anything with the information? So yeah, now that Iris is dead, it is going to continue working its way through her family bloodline. And to add stress to the situation, their mom actually comes back for the first time in about a decade at this point. It's not revealed right now, but later on she'll basically say like, it's not that I don't love you, and it's not that I didn't want to be a mom, it's that I was just so afraid of becoming my mother and being so paranoid about you guys dying your entire lives. And look, your mom was right all along. Whatever, she's back for the funeral, and this is where we start getting that like emotional infusion. Stephanie doesn't want anything to do with her because she feels abandoned, which is when her brother Charlie's like, hey, you basically did the same thing to all of us when you went away to college. Julie, her cousin, used to be your best friend. Now you don't even talk to her. So there's just like a bunch going on there that I'm glad that they've kind of mostly left aside. I don't know if there was a bunch more filmed and they were like, we need to keep this a nice tight hour 30 movie. Let's just get rid of some of this sentimentality. Because thankfully they don't ever over focus on that side of the story, because that is where it will feel the weakest in my opinion. But much like her leads of the past, Steph starts getting new feelings related to oncoming deaths. Starting with the super kind uncle. And this barbecue scene was so tense. Just setting up countless things that could go wrong. We got propane tanks, rakes under trampolines, broken glass, the memory that had over focused on him shutting off the lawnmower earlier in the day. Danger all around, again. And this is where the movie truly shines. A lot of the times the deaths in this series happen away from other people, or they're more abrupt when other people are around. This one really brings up that squirm factor of like, I think it's gotta be this person who goes next, but like, I feel like anything could happen at this point. Like there's a piece of glass in a drink that you're gonna be trying to track so tensely. I think this scene was most of the first official trailer, but I hadn't seen that, so this was an entire new experience for me, and I loved it. But yeah, it ends up being so interesting that even something that gets moved out of the way because it seemed really dangerous where it was ends up being a key item in setting off the chain reaction of events that leads to his head getting eaten by a lawnmower. Though having a quick look at the trailer now, there are actually scenes in this that do not happen. Like I'm seeing the mom getting stuck in a revolving door. That's not in the movie at all. There is a moment where someone's scared to go through one. Oh my god, there's gonna be a bunch of alternate scenes. I wonder if maybe they'll do something like part 3 where you can have a choose your own adventure. That would drastically change something later on, but could be better in the long run, actually. But yeah, with him dead, that's all it really takes for Steph to be fully on board with Iris's manifesto, and realizing that it seems like her grandmother was right. In the exact order that the people should have died in that skyline disaster, they start being killed in weird accidents, and once more time goes on, the more members of their family start dying in the exact order that they're born. So even though most of the family doesn't really believe this outside of her brother Charlie, she gets obsessed with trying to save Eric because theoretically he should be next in line. And again, this is the only scene I'd watched before the movie came out. It was the teaser clip out of some kind of festival or convention, See, he's a tattoo artist and a piercer, and it's just this insane series of disaster of him being like pulled into the fan by his nose ring, setting the entire building on fire. But the best part about this one is like how brutal intense it is building up. He didn't even die, not even seriously maimed. An incredible fake out that they put enough thought into to create an entire chain reaction that made you think, well, of course this guy's fucked. But Steph is still positive he has to be the next one up, and she's starting to sound a lot like grandma here, being like, oh my god, that could fall, and that kid with the soccer ball could could kick you into this, and then that dump truck's coming and horrible things could happen. And again, we're watching so entirely tense as this guy like almost gets hit by a truck. We got a nice little fake out. See, that's how you do it. You don't actually have him get hit by the truck, but you fake it out enough that you're like, oh God, because they've now done that in this franchise twice, so why wouldn't they do it a third time? But then while they're all arguing about her paranoia, Julie is in the background starting to run off, and all the things Steph just said she thought could happen to Eric happened to her. It's just so good. This weird series of events happen, and she gets knocked into a garbage can and then shoved into a garbage dump, and then she gets trash compacted before our eyes. So you might be wondering, why did it skip Eric? Turns out Eric wasn't the uncle's real kid. This scene was so funny because the mom was just like, your real dad is Jerry Fenbury. And apparently this is someone who Eric knows because he's just freaking out about it. And then he's like, is that why he always wanted to play catch? These movies are always the best when they're not taking themselves too seriously, especially this one. But yeah, that means Eric's in the clear and poor sweet Bobby is next. But their current plan is to find someone named JB because the death manifesto has him listed as someone who has heard of someone who managed to cheat a death premonition. One person who survived. Kimberly. Don't worry, we're not going to see Kimberly, or apologies for those who wanted to see Kimberly. I guess she was busy. But I assume at this point, seasoned watchers of the franchise might have a little bit of a hint of who JB probably is. Because thankfully the mom remembers that this JB that her mom used to talk about worked at a hospital, the Hope River Hospital, which is the same one from Final Destination 2. So JB is William Bloodsworth. I guess JB was his nickname, managing to get one last appearance in the franchise before Tony Todd passed away of stomach cancer. And because they knew he was dying, they actually let this be a final send-off for him and the character. Explaining the reason that he always knew so much about death design is because he was that little boy that Iris ended up saving and fully believed everything she had to say and has really just been waiting for it to be his time to go. But like her, like Iris, he's ended up with cancer as well. I know a lot of people wanted him to be like personified death or something, or like maybe some kind of like purgatory being so that he's neutral completely, but I'm very satisfied with the reasoning they gave us. And he lets them know that there are only two ways to potentially survive. Kill someone to take their existing life, the Death Note method, or kill yourself then be revived, the Edgelord method. I don't know, I'm just saying dumb things. Which to them doesn't seem that helpful, but Eric is all in on that plan to save his brother. He's like, we're in a hospital, what better place is there for you to die? And for Bloodworth, the final message he leaves them with, because he's not gonna help them anymore, and like what more can he really do? Again, it's a message that was just as much for them as it is for us. Which, as mentioned, was a completely unscripted line, as was pointed out by my editor AJ, that he intends to enjoy the time he has left, suggesting that they do the same because life is precious and you never know when it's gonna end, so enjoy every second. God damn, thank you, Mr. Candyman. Like, damn, first a Marvel movie made me cry, and now a Final Destination movie's gonna make me cry. What the hell, man? But by the time he leaves and the other three stop squabbling, Eric and Bobby are gone because he has a plan to give his brother a allergic reaction because he's allergic to peanuts with a peanut butter cup. And I don't know why they didn't have Reese's peanut butter cups. I don't know if Reese's just didn't want to be a sponsor, so they had to use these fake off-brand packaged ones, because come on, Reese's, this would have been such a good tie-in. Smile you was using Voss. But whatever, that's his grand plan. Basically have his brother die from anaphylactic shock, then give him the EpiPen and get a nurse in there or a doctor in at the last second. But that's a little risky. But on top of that risk, they are again just setting up just a series of all these little things that could go wrong. We get the spring in the vending machine breaking. You're wondering maybe the machine will just tip over and crush him. Then they're stashing him in a room with an MRI machine that he accidentally turns on. And it's just been powering up more and more and more. And MRIs are again just massive magnetic fields, so it'll just suck things right into them. So Eric's phone gets yanked onto the control pad just as the anaphylaxis is really starting to crank up. And somehow overrides the safety precautions into research level. Yeah, it's stupid as fuck, but also, yeah, we will allow it. Again, if you're gonna be stupid, at least be entertaining. And entertaining they will be, because Eric's pierced to the nines. We got nose, nips, and tip. The old Prince Albert yanked right out. Now maybe you're wondering why Eric would get reverse folded into an MRI machine when it's already been established that he is not part of that original design. Well, it's because death really doesn't like it when you mess with its plans. So because he tried to save save Bobby, he's getting taken out as collateral. So yeah, that's brutal, and it almost looks like Bobby's gonna be safe because like a nurse comes running in, but then that busted spring from inside the vending machine slams out and goes right through his head. Brutal, but so fun. Unfortunately, those are the last of the fun, goofy characters, just gone in an instant, and the next section is just it's a little bit dumb. So they basically decide that the only way that they can possibly survive is by bunkering down in Iris's cabin, because she managed to stay alive there for years. But again, that actually makes even less sense than Iris surviving there for years when she knew where everything was and had a very clear understanding of the way that death would try to set off its little machinations. No one spent any significant time here, and the entire thing is a trap. But, sure, the mom tries to go alone because if she can stay alive as long as possible, her kids will be safe. But this is where Steph gets that cheesy with it, being like, I'm the only one who can see him coming. And it's just too cheesy. It's not what I'm here for. And also, again, you literally just did not see what was coming in the hospital, but whatever. They set off to the cabin, and it's already looking cursed as hell. We've got traps. We've got barricaded walls. We've got sparks. It is a literal death trap. Death is waiting for you. We got the wind going and everything. It's a very specific formula. Before that, though, when they're leaving the hospital, they almost get hit by a logging truck, so we gotta love those callback fake outs. And yeah, everything immediately goes to shit. Steph's seatbelt gets stuck. The flower pot that almost fell the last time we were here sets off a chain reaction explosion, which the mom does narrowly survive just in time to save the son and get him unstuck before she gets dealt with one of the classic falling decapitations. I feel like almost every single one of these movies has at least one of those. So Stephanie's now just been drowning this whole time because the explosion knocked the RV sideways into water, and then she passes out, presumably dies, before she comes back to with Charlie reviving her. So now they think they're in the clear. She just died. He brought her back, even though that should mean that it immediately skipped over to Charlie, but sure, they're safe. Or are they? A week later, it's time for Charlie to go to prom when Steph starts noticing a series of signs that line up with everything from the night of the Skyline restaurant disaster. We've got one of the same old car going down the street. We got one of the girls wearing a dress that matches Iris's. And before that, one of their friends, Dr. Dads, makes an odd comment when they say that Charlie brought Steph back from the dead, and he was like, well, if she was unconscious and you managed to revive her with CPR, that means her heart never stopped beating. So death's still coming for both of you. Now, here's where we get some fun. After the hospital, the penny that Iris had taken from that little kid to stop the building disaster, she'd had that taped inside of her little death manifesto. And it falls out here only to be picked up by an old lady. And that old lady is then dropping that exact same penny when she goes to buy some lemonade in the exact same neighborhood where they all are, and it gets stuck where the train tracks should be able to switch over, which causes the train to derail, come right at them through the town. They both narrowly avoid being crushed before they get squashed by logs that were being carried by one of the other train carts. Brutal and so fun. That is how you do a callback death. None of this getting hit by trucks business. Take the thing that you have been faking out in this franchise for ages and bring it back in the most brutal way possible. And that's the movie. A little bit of a dip there at the end with the cabin where it felt dumb before that ending just bringing us back and being top notch. And I just love a movie that understands the assignment and they are being rewarded for it. It is the biggest debut for the entire franchise, which I think the one that had previously made the most money was unfortunately the fourth installment, which is horrendous. It's one of the biggest R-rated horror debuts in ages, something like that, or at least of this year. It gets a bit convoluted, but never enough that the logic and rules just stop making sense, especially if you just maintain that the main rule is that you're probably just shit out of luck. So real quickly, let's just rank them up. I gotta give the top spot to part 1. It started the entire franchise. It's super solid. It reminds me of a simpler time in life. Then I got no choice but to go with 3 because that was my first Final Destination movie, and I legitimately think it's very fun, and I love the camera and photo aspect to it, but very close, probably tied in that second position, is Bloodlines. It's this one. I had a blast with it. Then I'll give it to 5 because I really do enjoy that surprise prequel angle, but again, right on its tail is going to be part 2. I might not like the characters, but I really like how they tied it into part 1 and adding in this entire idea of if somebody who should have been dead interfered in your existence, that means you are also now a loose end that needs to be tied up. Then all the way at the bottom is the Final Destination, as in it mostly belongs in the trash. That's a little bit mean. It's not that bad. It's just also really not all that good either. But yeah, that is my thoughts on the Final Destination movies and a nice little rundown on part 6. Have you guys seen Bloodlines yet? What do you think of it? Is this your first Final Destination movie? Are you a seasoned fan of the franchise? Did you hate this one? I'm sure there's people out there that hated this. But yeah, let me know what you guys are thinking down below, and that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members, and of course to Surfshark for sponsoring the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below if you want to check those out. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.